You know, so we can go over. Did Chris say he was going to be here, Alex, to go
Uh,
to go over that Ohio one or no?
Let me see.
Because there's also another one we can go over too that I think was Jonathan's he submitted as well. Because I spoke with that agent yesterday and then she gave the counter and it doesn't look too good counter wise. But then we could of course counter the counter. But that was something that I was thinking of too, just because I saw Jonathan's name there.
Let me
Yeah, and then in terms of the paperwork stuff that we go over, of course we can't show like the actual subject to documents, but we can show the like state contracts, and then we can also describe what's basically stated in those sub two documents as well as kind of how we fill out just a standard state contract specifically for a subject to deal. That's kind of what I was thinking because I don't think we really discussed that, Alex, but I think we're probably on the same page there.
yeah. I don't think we went over that. I think just one thing to consider is I'm not sure how true this is, but I've heard from other people that only agents are allowed to fill out the state contract.
I asked Niles about that and he said that's BS.
Oh, okay.
But I've heard the same thing, man. I don't know, dude. I do not know. But that's what Niles said because I was talking to him yesterday about that.
It might just vary state by state for
Yeah.
like that.
Then I also asked that attorney for that closing we had yesterday in OKC, and he said the same thing. He's like, "No, you're fine." But like you said, it could vary state by state.
Cool.
Um, okay, so I'll definitely go over this one. Wait, Jonathan, are you there? You brought in I'm pretty sure Bridgestone Cliff, right?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, cool, cool. We'll go over that in a sec here. What time is it? 10:03. 14 people in here. Um, yeah, so I guess first we'll just start off with updates or if anyone has anything they want to share first before Alex and I kind of dive into some of the specific things. We're going to kind of incorporate some of the agent objections tied within the paperwork, like one of the common questions. And I know you guys see on that sheet we've shared, um, like typical frequently asked questions by agents and how to counter those, so to speak. I forgot what that document was called. I think it was just FAQ agents, right, Alex, or something like that in the helpful documents.
Yeah, I believe it's called What is Creative Finance?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So that one, just diving into a little more depth in terms of, hey, if an agent asks one of those things, how you can provide some more information on it. And one of the most common ones that agents are saying is, well, how do we know that you're going to be making payments or like what's the protection there for my seller? And of course, one of the main things we say, um, of course, you can say the performance deed and the deed in lieu, but before we usually mention that, I usually say typically like, well, hey, we're, you know, unless it's a deal, which isn't always the case, or it's pretty rarely the case when we're getting a deal with like no money down to seller, like a very low entry fee where there's nothing, no skin in the game for us. But most of the time, it's usually going to be like a $20,000 plus kind of entry for us typically. So that's one thing we tell people or agents, I should say, where hey, our skin in the game and our risk is I'm paying 20,000 plus dollars to acquire this house and it's a great rental long term and I'm getting that good interest rate. I would never allow myself to miss payments or default. And we actually use a third party servicing company that takes money from my account and makes those payments every single month. And that ensures that, you know, we won't accidentally forget and miss a payment. And that's usually totally solid and fine there. Occasionally, there will be some people that give you more pushback on that and really want to make sure if they're a more savvy agent or something like that. Then we talk about deed in lieu or performance deed, where if we miss payments for 30 days or whatever we, you know, agreed upon, then the property would get deeded back to that initial seller. Like the servicing company would hold that performance deed or deed in lieu, and they would notice if, you know, those payments were made for 30 plus days. But that's just another layer of complexity and having to have a TC do that. And there is some gray area state by state. And also, I think servicing company by servicing company, if that deed in lieu will actually suffice and serve its purpose. Right, Alex? I'm sure you've heard the same.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a gray area thing, but Sometimes just having that on paperwork and in writing makes people feel a lot better. But at the same time, we've closed deals where no one even asks about that. And it's just sign paper, sign paper, sign paper, and there's trust there. Um, but then one we're closing on next week, I believe, or the 30th, that one in Arizona, they requested that deed in lieu. So that's something that our TC is going to draft up and include there just to make everyone feel safer and more secure in that transaction in terms of us making those payments. Anything you wanted to add on that, Alex?
In regards to paperwork, um, just like everything, until you're actually filling it out, it just looks like a whole bunch of nonsense and just a whole bunch of words that we don't typically say. So once you fill it out and understand what areas you need to fill in, it's not as complicated as it really seems.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's totally true. And the main thing is, excuse me, I'm pulling up an example here of I'm going to show the OKC contract. You think that's fine? Because that's just the state form.
Yeah, maybe this one we just won't end up posting, but yeah, I think for the people in here, that's fine.
Yeah. Let me see one sec. But yeah, in terms of that one, basically what we're doing is it's going to vary brokerage by brokerage. Some will be fine with us using our own contract we have ourselves, which is the sub two contract that Pace provides. And then other brokerages, they will say, hey, I need that state mandated form. That's just a requirement from the brokerage. So ideally, we like to use our sub two one because it's much easier and protects us more. And it's just copy paste, where all these different state contracts vary. But there was the closing we had yesterday where we had to use the state form. And basically, what we did with the state form is we just added our subject to addendum, which has all the disclosures on there that protects everyone involved and, you know, basically describes what the sub two transaction is, the risks of those, and just covers everyone's ass, so to speak, specifically the buyer. But in like the special provisions section of that contract, we have a little bit of verbiage there basically stating what's going on within that transaction and how it needs to be, which it's literally as simple as 200, I believe it was like 230K mortgage balance. That's staying in place. Buyer is acquiring the property subject to the existing mortgage. Buyer is taking over existing payments on solar and water heater. Buyer will pay seller $16,000 at close of escrow. Buyer will pay closing costs and agent commission. And then you're just filling out the state contract and checking off all the appropriate boxes beforehand. So really, anytime you're doing a subject to transaction and you're doing paperwork with a state contract specifically, you're really just making sure you're attaching the addendum, which is a subject to specific addendum. That unfortunately we can't share that because we signed the NDA for that in Pace's group, and of course we paid good money to, I guess, get access to that. But you can draft up something yourself, or if you join the group, you have the paperwork or JV, or have an attorney do your own, whatever it is. This is just for future reference, of course. That's pretty much the only thing you would need. And then on the state contract, you would just have in the special provisions really breaking down the terms and what that looks like. And I am trying to multitask and pull this up here, this contract. And I'm just going to skim through it too and make sure we can actually show this and that there's nothing nothing that I shouldn't show on there. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Alex? Sorry, I'm just scrolling through this really quick. I mean, it's pretty just basic stuff with the paperwork, man. Like, I mean, the only thing we could really do would be like, which we can't, would be showing the subject to addendum in that specific sub two paperwork and just reading it word for word and describing what it means.
No.
But I mean, I guess one other thing I can mention too is the inspection period and option period in contracts. You're always going to want that as a, not even as a wholesaler, but ideally as a wholesaler, you want that because that gives you your time to have your inspection where your earnest money is fully, excuse me, where your earnest money is fully refundable. Because during that inspection period, and I mean, I guess we're kind of BSing, but like we always shoot for a 14-day inspection period just to give us as much time as possible to, one, if we want to buy and keep the property ourselves, which ideally we try to, that gives us at least, 5, 7, whatever it is, days to get an inspector out there to walk the property and for us to review. Um, and then also too, if we weren't doing that, you still want an inspection period because then that gives you time to market the property to actually find an end buyer so you can wholesale that deal and make an assignment fee. Because if you had a 3-day inspection period or no inspection period or something like that, that means you're 100% locked into this deal and your earnest money is not refundable. You can't get your earnest money back. So with us, we're always shooting for 14 days. Sometimes we'll get pushed back. And it's 10 days instead, but usually that 10 to 14 day range is good. When I used to wholesale a lot of cash deals, sometimes we'd get away with 17 or 21 days. And there's always there's always things you can do too and push for extensions and stuff, which I used to have to do a lot because it was harder with cash deals in smaller markets. But I mean, typically here we're not really having to do extensions at all because we're ideally locking up deals that are good deals that have a very low probability of having to cancel on. Um, so that's just one thing I want to mention with the inspection period. You're always going to want to have that and make sure you're reading verbiage that's stating, which pretty much in all cases it is. The inspection period is that time period you have where your earnest money is fully refundable. And I would just make sure you're never putting non-refundable earnest money up in hopes of wholesaling the property or you not knowing the full extent of the condition and things like that, because then you could really get stuck with a mess and then you lose your earnest money.
And just real quick, there's some people that might know exactly what earnest money deposit means. And so basically what that is, it's just a way of you verifying that you are serious about buying the home. And so typically most people want it to be around 1% of the purchase price of the home. So if it's a $500,000 home, $5,000 EMD. As an investor slash buyer, it's always best to try to get as low as you can for EMD.
Yeah.
In times where we've put like 2,000 when the home's worth 400K and the agent will be like, hey, can you make it 1%? Which isn't a problem. It just helps us not have to have, hey, we have 5 deals out, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000. And so that just kind of adds up and it almost becomes a pretty hefty expense on us. So that's something that we typically, just like everything else, we want to be in as low as possible.
Yeah. And it also does suck too. Luckily, it's been good for us. And I've dealt with it maybe like a while ago, like 8 months ago, but it wasn't a lot of EMD. But we just had a scenario, Alex and I, where we had this deal in escrow and inspection report came back good. We thought everything was solid. We were going to buy it and wrap it. And basically, the agent kind of gave us a little bit of misinformation. And he told us that a loan mod had already taken place and everything was good to go. And then apparently that loan mod actually hadn't taken place. And there was a bunch of gray area and issues where if the seller called the lender and said, hey, it's owner occupied to do the loan mod, then it's fraud. Of course, we don't want to be any part of that. So we were past our inspection period and we had like 4K EMD down. So luckily there we were able to get our EMD back and not have to lose it because it was past the inspection period. Right, Alex? I mean, that's something to mention too. Like, doesn't mean you'll always lose your EMD after inspection.
Yeah. It's just another thing you're gonna have to negotiate on. And it's not a fun conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And am I allowed to screen share here? Oh, I am. Okay, let me screen share really quick. I'm just gonna skim over the contract, just I guess for a basic idea. Oh wait, I'm not able to.
Okay, let me help. And then also one thing to know is EMD is basically like a compensation for the seller if we were not to perform. And so it's kind of there to, hold on. It's there to show that we have skin in the game and that
Yeah, that we're serious too. And then also, like you said, because especially with these on market deals, well, I guess it just in general, but if we have someone locked up for a month or longer in a contract, that could be $2,000 plus a mortgage payment. So all of a sudden, if we're under contract with them, wasting their time for 2 months, and we're not serious, at least, that EMD they can fall back on and it covers their monthly payment that they had to cover while we screwed around and didn't perform. I'm not saying us personally, I'm just using as reference. And then another thing too to mention with like direct to seller stuff, you can't really do this with direct to agent. When I used to do a lot of direct to seller, and when people ask me, I'll always tell them, always start low. Never say, "Oh, I'll give you $1,000 earnest money or the 1% of purchase price, whatever it is." Like with direct to seller, we would literally do $100 earnest money deposits, and 90% of the time, no one would say anything. And for that 10%, they did. Oh, only $100. You're not too serious. Well, we do really high volume, and we always just start with $100 because right now we have 8 deals in escrow. And if each person wanted 4, 3, 5K, whatever it is, now all of a sudden we have 30, 40 grand out in earnest money. And that just isn't effective or really makes sense for us. So we always start low. But if you totally want us to come up, we can. And usually they'll just say, "Oh, okay, I understand. No big deal. That's fine." So with like direct to seller stuff, we used to do super low EMD. And then depending on the state, some states are mutual release, meaning for you to get your EMD back, the seller needs to sign off on the form as well, which Texas is one of those states. Florida is one of those states, and I forgot the other states, but Alex and I we had to cancel on a Florida deal, and then the Texas deal was this weird loan mod situation. But basically on those, the sellers cooperated and it was totally fine and they signed off. If the sellers didn't cooperate, then that's something that could get taken into litigation and just a whole bunch of issues that probably aren't really even worth pursuing. And then your EMD is just locked up in escrow for months until eventually that seller signs or until it gets resolved. So that's another thing too, where it's like, as long as you're performing within that inspection period, though, you'll always get your EMD back. It could just get locked up for a while in escrow. Okay, I'm gonna screen share this. I'm
This,
just
yeah.
What was that?
One thing I want you to consider is it has your holding company. I don't know if you really cared, but I just wanted you to
Oh
think.
yeah, I don't care. I don't care.
Okay, cool.
And I'm just gonna skim it super quick anyway and just go over some main parts here. Okay. So yeah, basically address, purchase price, earnest money. I just wanted to go over the special provisions mainly. And of course, you're going to have your closing date. A lot of this stuff is just self-explanatory. Like these contracts aren't fun to read and go through because it's so much small print and a lot of just BS that isn't super significant or important. But like here you go right here, investigations, it's inspections, reviews. Buyers shall have 14 days after time reference to complete any investigations. So that 14-day period, that was our option period. People call it either option period or inspection period. And that's when you are allowed to, quote unquote, that's what it means, inspect the property, do your due diligence, make sure everything's good and sound before proceeding and moving forward, where your earnest money is non-refundable. And then let's see here. Then there's some specifics just explaining what the inspection period is, final walkthrough. Typically when we're doing these deals too, the buyer covers everything. So we cover all closing costs, HOA transfer fees, tax transfer fees, things like that. Okay, here we go. Here's the special provisions. This is what I wanted to show. So every contract will have like a special provision section or like an other section or something like that where you add in verbiage. And basically here in the verbiage, buyer will be purchasing the property subject to the existing mortgage. Buyer will pay the seller $16,000 and agent $7,000, which was their 3% commission at
Can you
close.
zoom in a little?
Oh shit, my bad. Is it zoomed out?
It's just kind of far for my eyes.
Got you. Is that better?
Yeah, it's much better. If you
Okay,
do
cool.
one more, it'd be great, but that's cool.
One more.
Yeah, I think so.
Is that better?
Yeah, for the people on the phone.
Okay, cool. Good point. Good point. Was that other stuff really zoomed out too? I wasn't even
Oh,
thinking
you're
of that.
good. You're
Okay.
good. The main thing I
This
want.
is kind of the only part I really wanted to show.
Yeah.
But in special provisions, like every single contract will have special provisions or other or something like that. Usually it's titled special provisions, but this one says additional provisions, and then some contracts will just say other. Like I know the PACE contract that we typically use, I believe it just says other. And that's when you'd have that specific verbiage in there. So buyer will be purchasing the property subject to the existing mortgage. Buyer will pay seller $16,000 at close of escrow, agent $7,000. Buyers shall pay for closing costs as far as what is related to title and escrow fees. Seller is responsible to pay for any property taxes they owe up until the day of closing, as well as any liens on title. And then buyer will take over monthly payments on solar, water heater, and the filtration, which not every property is going to have that. But for example, this one had solar, a water filtration system, and then a water heater that were recently purchased and had like $260 worth of monthly payments for all three of those. So that was something we included on there. And then the seller of the property, he wanted to stay for 30 days post closing and lease the property back and pay us rent for a month. So then that says their buyer will lease the property back to seller for 1 month for $2,300. And one thing I wanted to mention, Alex, of course, we have a shit ton of stuff like on our plate, and it's hard to track all this. And I guess this was something that title missed, TC missed a little bit, and buyer missed. But it literally should have just been taken out of the cash to seller at closing, the $2,300. Because now it's like, which doesn't make sense, because now it's like now that seller has to pay our buyer directly that $2,300 because 30 days is too short to really mess around with the lease agreement and do a bunch of stuff like that. So they're just going to try to do like just a basic payment kind of under the table type thing for that 2,300, where I think I mentioned it to title previously. Would it be best if that 2,300 was just subtracted from the cash at closing for seller, which would make sense, but then they didn't respond. And then, but I think that would have just been easier.
Yeah.
That was kind of a random one-off thing I just wanted to mention.
Yeah.
So yeah, special provisions. That's just the main part I wanted to focus on. Then usually you will have the addendum attached. Here you're having release of earnest money. It's talking about that. A written release is executed by buyer and seller. So also, I guess Oklahoma is a mutual release as well, which now I remember. And that's pretty much everything. And then, yeah, I just wanted to show that briefly. Let me check the chat. Did anyone say anything?
Yeah, I caught up on it.
Okay, cool. And did you want to add anything in terms of the contracts, Alex? I mean, I think it's just pretty much what I covered is just super basic stuff that covered really everything with the standard state forms. Just everything's going to vary by state. The main thing to look at is, of course, your entity name as the buyer, and of course, the right seller's name and the correct address info and stuff like that. Then pretty much the inspection period, that's super significant because you want to make sure you're not losing earnest money or getting screwed over. And then also, of course, the special provisions and verbiage you're putting in there that's stating exactly what's going to go on in that transaction. And then having your correct addendum in place too for subject to seller finance or whatever it may be. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. I think that's all I wanted to show with the contract stuff. Did you want to go over something, Alex, with anything else with the contract stuff?
I think we're good on the contract stuff. I think we could jump into it. Chris is here, so if you
Okay.
want to look at that deal, we can. Or actually, if you want me to screen share, let me do it.
Okay, bet. Yeah, I'll screen share. I mean, I'll make you host just because I think you were looking at that deal a little more than me. And then Noah's here too. Okay, cool. So that was your deal, Noah, that contract we just went over.
Sorry, just give me 1 second getting this prepared. Cool. Okay. Oh, is this not the one? Oh, maybe not. Chris, do you mind sending me the address? I can't find it.
Let me look too really quick.
Okay.
I thought it was in this
Alrighty.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
this is a lead that Chris brought to us yesterday, and we actually had a really good call with the agent. But after kind of reviewing further numbers, uh, the fact that there's an HOA is kind of a problem because with a home like this, I immediately think, oh, pad split would be a good opportunity because it already has 5 bathrooms and 4 baths and is a huge house, like over 4,000 square feet, which you don't really hear homes being that large of a size. But some of the key takeaways or key things to consider of why this probably isn't a deal is let's look at the median home price in Mayfield. Okay, so we go here, and just based off this, like it's double over the median. And right now, in a market that we're currently in, homes that are above the median are not moving as fast because homes are just too expensive with 8% interest rates. So homes that are closer to that median are still doing fine. But just one thing to consider when looking at this, it's like it's double the median price and it's a really large house, which makes it harder to move as like a long-term rental because there are more families that are gonna fit into a 3-2 than a 5-4. And so for that reason, it's already kind of a put off. And so when I go in here, this is Zillow, which everyone has access to. It's free and could use it to comp. And so just kind of doing this real quick. It's a 5-4. I'm gonna do a 4-2 just because I already know that there's not gonna be too many 5-4 builds. So we're just gonna look at things in a general area. And so like let's look at these homes. These are what's available on the market. And so I mean this one's kind of new, so I get where it's at. And this is another thing I like to tell people to look at is the days on Zillow compared to saves. That just kind of shows you that the people that are looking at the home think it's nice and that it's priced accordingly. And so you go look at this one. Keep in mind, this is only 1 bedroom smaller and is literally in the same neighborhood. So we look at this. I mean, it's 1,000 square feet smaller, so that's gonna play a major factor. But ooh, this one has really good traction, 2 days and 50 saves. So something like this one will probably move pretty fast. I'm sure it'll get under contract within the first 2 weeks. And so one like this is going to get pretty good traction. But because this is bigger home and basically what 130, $140,000 more, I don't think there's going to be too many eyes on this one because they just listed that where it's at. And so I like to look at sold. And because the market has shifted and interest rates keep going higher, I like to start with 90 days as sold and last. And if I don't really see much like this, you don't really see too much. There's one right here that
And that's a good perspective too, because right when you switch that to 90 days, all those yellow boxes that showed sold, 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 sold just went away in that nearby radius, which just shows how much harder it's actually going to be to move that property that already looked a little tricky anyway, with it being higher than the median home price and so large.
yeah. Yeah, and so because we didn't see much like that, I'll go out and push it back to 6 months. But when you do this, you're gonna want to account for the market shifting because what sold 6 months ago at 530 is not gonna sell at 530 in current interest rates. It'll probably be more like 500. So this one was only bought uh, a little over 3 months ago. And so this is probably a really, really good comp. This is probably why they listed this at 520 because they're like, okay, the market shifted, but it's pretty similar build, more square footage. And so just looking at this one, um, it shows that kind of where they're listed at isn't really too over market, but as an investor, it still doesn't make sense because there just really isn't no exit strategy. As a long-term rental, I believe we got the mortgage statement and the payments were coming out to just a little below 2,900. And so then now to find a rental comp, basically the same thing. You're just gonna go for rent 4.2, not doing the exact build because there's not, I already know there's not gonna be 5.4s on the market. But then you go over here and just kind of look 5, 2.5, much smaller. This one's gotten decent traction, but this would still be negative cash flow as a long-term rental. And that's not even factoring in like vacancy and repairs. So it would probably be like $500 bleeding a month, which is simply not a deal. This is pretty different of a build, so I guess you can't really use this one. Let's see what this is. Yeah, these are all kind of smaller.
Then to answer a question in the chat, yes, we'll post these on YouTube. You'll be able to see the recording, and then also for HOA, what's the like max we can take? It's going to really vary by a case basis. I mean, if it was some insane high rise, brand new glass condo or mansion or something like that, where the HOA is like 800 plus a month, which I've seen some like that, even 1,500 plus a month, which is crazy. Something like that, I just know won't work. But it's still definitely a case basis. Like the HOAs are just, of course, we can still make deals happen with HOAs. I think like two we have, or actually almost, I think all of them we have in escrow right now, except the one we just closed on yesterday have HOAs.
Yeah,
The main thing with HOAs is it just makes it harder for short-term rental stuff, and then also pad split. And then if the HOA is super costly each month, then it eats away into your cash flow. But it's going to be a case basis. I think the only thing that I would really watch for, which I don't think those will really be in the list anyway, like I said, are the ridiculously high, like super high end home or very high end condo that has that $800 plus a month HOA or something absolutely ridiculous. Something like that, like 9 times out of 10 or more than that, like 99 times out of 100 isn't going to work. But I still wouldn't disregard it completely because, say, for example, it was a super high end, nice place, but we were getting it with equity and a super low interest rate. We could still wholesale that to a homestead buyer who might actually want to live in that themselves. So I still wouldn't like completely exclude it or just disqualify that.
that's a great point. And just to show you this one a little bit more, I use this a website called Rentcast, which is free. It's very similar to Rentometer, which is, I would say, probably the more popular one. And so it kind of pulls past sold comps for rental comps. And so you look here and keep in mind this home's kind of hard to analyze because of how large it is. Most of the homes that we're looking at are usually like a 2.2, in between a 2.2 and a maybe a 4.3, which are like regular size, traditional sized homes. And so just looking at this, you could see that the similarities are pretty off. So these aren't super accurate comparables, but they're just to kind of give you a better idea of where homes are kind of renting. So when looking at this, I would probably only use the top one because a 3, 1.5 is way too far off to even bother using as a comp. And so this one, the closest we could find is 2,200. And our monthly payment is 2,900 before the HOA, which I think the HOA is only maybe 30, 40 bucks a month. But it just kind of to go and show you how this probably isn't a deal. Just looking, let me see what the interest rate was. It's a 3.375. And so even with that good of an interest rate, not every time is it going to be a deal if it's under 5% interest rate and under 10% down. And on this one, there was a fair amount of equity just based off where it was last sold at. This was bought with a conventional loan, so they actually put a good amount down. So with this one, not only would we have to make those $2,900 monthly payments, we're also going to have to factor in 100 to 200 bucks of monthly payments to the seller, which would kill the deal even more than it already does. So it's really unfortunate to get to a situation where you finally find an agent or seller who are open to terms, but then you go and run the numbers and there's no exit strategies to really to do.
What did this one rent for, Alex? Sorry, I was like looking at my other monitor
No
when you were
worries, no
showing.
worries. So I would say you could probably rent it for maybe 26, 27.
Oh, okay, so it's bleeding, not
Or
even factoring in.
I don't know, man, because I see this one and this is decent. Like seeing these numbers 39 to 29, you typically want to see a 1-to-1 ratio. If it's a 1-to-1 ratio, you know it's listed correctly. So this one would probably move around. I'm sure if you put out 25, 26, there would be someone to hop on it right away. And that's not to say this one isn't already rented out. Sometimes I've noticed with these homes listed for rent on Zillow, is it's a little there's a lag effect with it. They don't really take it off immediately. But just kind of based off what I'm kind of seeing around in the nearby area, I'm not really seeing it make sense. And there's ones like this that there's no way these people are going to find someone for this. I mean, 14 days, zero contacts. This is how you know something's not priced right.
Yeah,
And just looking at it, I mean, to charge 6,500 a month is pretty absurd.
yeah, and yeah, no, that's very good points you brought up there. And everything, a lot of stuff is a case by case basis too. And I think I was talking to Alex earlier, and I think we're probably going to do this like every Tuesday. We'll have like maybe 20 to 30 minutes of our meeting being like role play and call review and stuff like that. And then I'm thinking every Saturday we will do um, like 30 minutes of people who have brought in deals and want us to review them, or if you submitted a lead or something like that, and you want us to analyze it just like that. I think that'd be something that'd be insightful too, because no matter how many times we do that, it's always going to vary case by case, and it's going to be good for everyone to see.
Yeah.
Um, so we can totally do that as well. And then also, let's see here. I kind of wanted to do the same thing for a lead that I think it was Jonathan. Yeah, yeah, it was Jonathan that Jonathan submitted. Um, it was that one in Houston or just outside of Houston, where we were going to originally do 8K cash to seller, and then the agent countered and said the seller wants 25K, um, which I can, if you can give me host Alex to screen share, that'd be cool.
And then another thing, Jack, you know a little bit more about it than myself. If we could help people set up Vicaro, so where they're able
Macaro. Sorry, I thought it was going to be something like legit.
to.
Vicaro is like, yeah, I mean, dude, it's Vicaro. It's literally just so that's what I do. It's not super professional. And like the way I found it was like when I would hire VAs, that's the app they use to record their calls. Where literally Recaro is just this free thing on Google. I guess we could just throw the link up in the Discord. But basically, you don't have to make an account. You don't do anything. You just go onto Vicaro and you click record, and then it's records your call, and you can save the audio file. But literally, what I'll do is and of course, we could do it through our CRM and stuff like that. But I'll just prefer making calls cell phone, speaker, take my headset off, put it on my desk, have this mic up, then I just hold it on speaker and record it on Vicaro. Um, so that's pretty much what you can do as well. You can go onto your laptop, computer, whatever it is, as long as there's a mic. And if you want to record your calls, one for your own practice to hear how you're doing, how you're sounding, and then two, to bring it to us and share it with us in one of the Zooms or something like that for feedback, that's also great as well too. And also really it's just seeing your progression too, because then like when you get your first deal, I think it's pretty cool to have that call recording, or then hey, if you really stick with this, you're listening to your first calls you made 6 months ago, and then now 6 months from now, you could be really doing well and doing a lot of these, and you're just like, oh wow, that's crazy how much I progressed from 6 months ago to now. So yeah, I'll throw that in there in the Discord, Vicaro, but super easy. And there's probably something better, man, than Vicaro, but it's like you don't have to create an account. It's totally free. You just click the button and you can copy the link for your call recording, or you can just click download. Um, so I've never really super explored other options or alternatives. It's just that one's been the easiest, and you don't have to set anything up, and
I'll
it's
paste it in chat. It's kind of weird to spell.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, dude. I thought I was gonna get like hyped up when you were saying that. Like I thought it was gonna be something specific, and then you said Vicaro, and I'm just like laughing.
It's free, man. It's free.
Yeah, and it's like some anime
Yeah.
little cartoon character on there. It's cool though, it works. Don't get me wrong.